Good evening. My name is Jefferson Earl. I'm an Australian citizen. Today is the 5th of October 2022. I'm recording this message with a very heavy heart. That I have to do this message because my conscience is gnawing at me that I would begin to start to speak not only to the Australian people, but also to the Russian people and also to the greater world. First and foremost, I, like many, find a great displeasure in war. But the Bible speaks that there is a time for war and there's a time for peace. What we have experienced in the last 2.5 years could only be described as a pandemic of falsehoods being pushed through the mainstream media. The problem with that is that the average person is unable to come to a conclusion as to what the truth is and will make their mind up based on what they're being told. Unfortunately, the greatest problem in war is that truth often becomes the first casualty. And I think we've seen that more than anything before. And I cannot help but say right now is the first time in my life I'm absolutely embarrassed, ashamed, and very, very scared of the way my country, Australia, is now becoming. It is obvious to me that our country supporting Ukraine at this very time is based on what can only be described as a lie. If you want to know the truth about what's happening in Ukraine, it's not, don't listen to me. But I would encourage you to go and seek out Oliver Stone's documentary, Ukraine Under Fire, which describes about how there was a coup that took place in 2014. And that coup replaced the government of Ukraine with some proxies of the West. Now, I love the West, and I certainly love the United States, and I love my country, Australia and Britain and all those Western nations. But in reality, there was a coup. And there's telephone conversations with Victoria Newland and those people that were involved back then that were talking about what was happening. And it's very obvious. And so this time right now is not a time to be saying that anyone that opens their mouths that is not against Russia, that is not against President Putin, and saying that those people that are maybe not supportive of the West's role in what's going on are extremists. But now is the time for truth. Now is the time for clear thinking and for people to actually think about what's happening. For many, many years before the pandemic, before all of this, I watched as President Putin would announce consistently that he had tried to warn the West over and over again that there were missiles in Poland, that he did not know whether or not those missiles had nuclear warheads. Now, wasn't the issue back in Khrushchev's time, wasn't the issue that Russia was moving weapons into countries that were surrounding America, into Cuba? And the Kennedy at the time brought America right to the brink of Third World War, right to the brink of nuclear war, in defense of the values of the West, in defense that a country may be putting missiles on the border. Is it okay for the West to then do the same thing to Russia and Russia not respond? When I watched for years and years, Putin warning very clearly, stop doing it. Was it okay for Biden to leave $80 billion in the hands of the Taliban and the terrorists that we so hardly fought against? We lost our own blood. Our own lives were shed of our own countrymen in Afghanistan to fight against terrorists. Wasn't that what we were told? And yet we did defeat them. And as soon as Biden was in power, he gave them $80 billion worth of weaponry. Is that a legitimate thing to do? Or is that something that we have to ask questions about? I am up to my eyeballs concerned with this situation and what is happening in Ukraine, and the fact that the media is pushing the situation that will be irretrievable soon and place our country in great risk and great danger. So I say this to President Putin: please show calm and resolve. Remember that there are many Australians who do not believe the narrative, that we are not extremists in any way, shape and form, and much rather peace. But they seem hell-bent on pushing you to war. So please, President Putin, be wise. Know this. May God bless you. I have no fear of the Australian government, and I have no fear of the people that may attack me for this message, because I am very sure that history will recount that what I have said is correct, that Russia right now stands to protect itself against a regime, both not only in Australia but in the West, that is hell-bent on our destruction. And I cannot believe that the Australian people would fall for this as they had fallen for so many things recently. And I have nothing to lose than to come out and support Russia in its stance against an aggression of the West. And I ask that the Western people would stop and think, do we have a fight against Russia? I have Russian friends. What do we have against Russian people? Nothing. Wasn't Russia pushed into this action? Yes, no one will say that war is nice. And yes, we would all agree that we would rather that there is no war. But in reality, I tell you this, what President Putin is doing is fighting not only for Russia, but from the freedom of the Western nations. I want these questions answered. I want to know, why was there 40 biological weapons facilities discovered by the Russians in Ukraine? What were they there for and what were they doing? I want to know, why was there a coup to infiltrate Ukraine, particularly by George Soros, that has brought mass destabilization? Why has it been Zbigniew Brzezinski talks about in his book, The Grand Chessboard, of his ideology that they need to grab hold of Russia and cause a disintegration to Russia? Why? So that the West, and when we say the West, not the good parts of the West, but the bad parts of the West, the false parts of the West, those people that removed Trump from office by illegitimate means. Biden could not even get 200 people at his meetings, yet Trump was pulling 50,000 and got 85 million people to vote, and he lost the election because they stopped the election at night. Does it matter if you call me a fool or you call me an idiot? There's 85 million people in America that voted for Donald Trump, and not that many people voted for Biden. They framed the insurrection on January 6th. They call it an insurrection. Don't you think that a man that has 85 million people, if he really called for an insurrection, for the country that has more arms than any standing army in the world, that those people would stand up and physically take? Not a handful of FBI agents and a couple of people that were led in to the Capitol building, and they frame it as there was a big insurrection? No, I'm sorry. Just like we warned you about this and the resulting effect it will have on people and the sickness that was to come and is to come, I'm now warning you about what's happening right now. If the Western people would take the backing of the news media and continue to fall for the propaganda machine that is the news media, and call Putin the big bad enemy, then the West will reap that which it sows. Nobody is asking for war. But I think in relation to the way that I've seen the American leadership in the past 20 years, other than Donald Trump, the way that America has always pushed its agenda on other countries and at any moment attacked other countries. And yet I've seen Russia be completely patient and extremely restrained until it got to this point where offensive weapons were being placed in Ukraine on the border and atrocities were being committed not by Russia, by Ukraine, by those puppets who were placed in power like Zelensky, the actor. And so I would say this to President Putin. You do have my support because I know that you are a genuine man. None of us are perfect. But history will dictate and history will reveal the darkness of what these people have been doing. And I speak to the Russian people, be brave and be strong. Be wise in the way that you go forward. President Putin, do not be suckered in or cajoled into any action that will be beyond what God would have you do. Be patient and be calm, because no, many people in the West are on your side. Many people in the West do not believe what we are being told. Just like we said for 2.5 years that the virus came clearly out of Wuhan. If you want to know how the virus was created, then you can look up this document in the Journal of Nature. It's called A Cluster of Bat SARS Coronavirus Shows Potential for Human Emergence. And it's very clearly funded by the Dr. Fauci's NIH with the help of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, in conjunction with the Wuhan Virology Lab. There is no question. It is not a zoonotic virus. It is a bioweapon released by the CCP in conjunction with the Obama administration. Now, you can argue that it's not, but you need to go and read the paper and look at the gain-of-function word that they made so that it wasn't able to easily be defeated by therapeutics that we had. And it was highly pathogenic. And yet they lied and they lied and they lied. And now the truth is coming out about the therapeutic that they gave you. And unfortunately, the truth is yet to come about the magnitude of what they have done with this and the damage and destruction that it's going to cause. So for the Russian people, we are on your side. Many, 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 many millions of people in the West do not believe the narrative. We are not in a position to speak because we are getting blocked on every channel and we have no voice. So I hope this message gets through to you. We don't want war in any way, shape or form. And I love Australia and I don't want to see my people dragged in to this conflict. I want to see peace on this earth. But right now, the Australian government has spent $300 billion on COVID and there's hundreds of millions of people dying of starvation. Now, I want the West to answer another question. When Vladimir Putin said the other week that only 2 ships from Ukraine that had wheat in them were getting to the third world nations when there's hundreds of millions of people starving. Why? Is Putin lying? Oh, Putin's the big bad guy, right? No, I'm sorry. The leaders of the West right now are the most corrupt people I've ever seen, and they are evil people. And I have no worries to say how I feel about these people. They are disgraceful. And they are leading us down to a track that is going to cause great, great destruction. And I pray to Russia to be careful and to people of the West and whistleblowers to come forward in the name of Jesus to speak out now before it is too late. Because it's likely that these people will try and pull a false flag. The other question I have, Nord Stream. Do people really think that Russia would blow up its own money-making pipeline when they can just turn the tap off? No. Victoria Nuland once again said that there would be something done about Nord Stream. Biden himself said, we will do something about Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And it has been done. And we know what was done. And the Americans, who are great people, are also like the Australians and the British and the New Zealanders and the Israelis and only God knows who else that have been infiltrated, that we now know, from other forces and people in our own countries that have sold themselves out to higher-ups and to elite outside of our nations that are dictating policy inside our nations to enslave us all. So I just wish Russia all the best. I really reach out also to the Ukrainian people. Don't believe the lie. Stand up. Stand up now. Get on the streets. Protest en masse. Turn against your government and turn against the tyranny that is coming upon the world. And I will warn the world, 2023 will be one of the darkest times that you have ever seen. 2023 will be an incredibly dark time. But remember this, it is always darkest before the dawn. This is not the time of the end. This is not the time where Jesus comes back. This is the time for revival. This is the time for incredible things to happen. We will win. People have been doing horrendous things behind the scenes, will be judged. People, after the damage has occurred, will begin to wake up and realize that they've been wronged. Hold on, be strong, because we're going to win this battle. 2023 is going to be tough, so hold on. And remember to pray. Pray and ask Jesus to help us in this time, because it's about to get really dark and really rough. They obviously have another virus planned. Be ready for monkeypox to come out and be ready for them to go extremely hard. Stand up and do not listen to the narrative and take a stand. For Australian people, my advice is this. Do not attend rallies in central cities, but create friendly sit-down rallies in the outer suburbs and support those rallies where you have peace and you talk about how to get through. If there is another virus, which there will be, there is a place for lockdown. But for the Australian people, I say this. Do not allow them to allow Coles and Woolworths and Bunnings and Dan Murphy's to be open. But set a date, 30 days, ask for a week to store food, and then lock down completely for 30 days and take the narrative away from the enemy and do not let them have this ridiculous form of half-hearted lockdown. And that's why China is doing zero COVID, because China knows that they're going to be able to stamp out the next virus that they're going to help release while it is infecting the whole world. Don't let them do it again. Be smart. When there is a need for a lockdown, lock down and do it severe and get rid of the virus. Bring the replication number below 1 and stop this nonsense. We do not have to listen anymore to our leaders. We do not have to be fearful of those people who do not know what is going on. I have no intention, I'm not an extremist, no intention to encourage any form of war. But Russia has a right to protect herself, and I do not believe the narrative that's being passed through. So I just pray for Russia and the Ukrainian people and for the Australian people and for the American people. Stand up. Be brave. We will win. It's about to get really tough. Be wise, President Putin. I'm praying for you. God bless.